Let's start with the AI story, because you caught some waves a couple of weeks ago when you put out a tweet, and there was a press release as well from you and the company. You've been working with OpenAI, with their chatbot, and you said that you've been able to replace, or at least able to ensure that using these chatbots, it takes up the work of about 700 employees. How significant, then, is the AI overlay going to be for Klarna going forward? What is it going to mean for employees? Does it mean you're going to have fewer workers? And what does it mean for costs?
Well, big question.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it actually starts with the vision that we set out for the company in 2015, where we pivoted slightly the company. And we looked into where are banking services going? How is this going to develop in the long term? And our conclusion was that at some point in time, you wake up in the morning and your digital financial assistant will say, I've analyzed your mortgages, I've analyzed your payments, I've concluded, Tom, that I can save you £20 on your mortgage, and the only thing you need to do for me to switch from provider A to B is to say yes, right? And if you think about the consequences of that, you realize that we're looking at a very different banking environment where the digital services can help you find the best rates instantaneously all the time. It will drive down the excess profits that we've seen in banking services for the last 100 years. And in that environment, we ask ourselves, what does Klarna, where should Klarna be? What should our role be in that, right? We realize, well, the best role must be to be that financial assistant of yours. Because if we did save you £20, maybe you say, hey, I'm going to tip you £2 for helping me to do that. So ever since that's been the objective of Klarna, as to how can we help consumers save time, save money, make them more in control of their finances. And now when ChatGPT came along, to answer your question, we saw a massive acceleration of the ability to achieve this, right? It was always like this kind of dream, like self-driving cars. We knew we wanted to get there, we just didn't know how long it was going to take, and we were always convinced, however, it was eventually going to happen. So now we see, since a year ago when we worked with these services, we are adopting AI across the company in a lot of different areas. However, as many others have tried as well, it's a new technology. You have to learn how to use it, how to make it safe, how to make sure that you protect the privacy of the consumer. So there's been a lot of different things. And I think also what we realized is that few things are really live yet. Few things have created big business impact. And so it was at the event of that when we now took this AI assistant live, and we saw that it actually had this profound impact on the business.
And it's going to mean fewer customer service agents. What does it mean in terms of the workforce and in terms of cost savings?
Right. So, I mean, one thing one have to remember is that we don't employ customer service agents ourselves. We work with big providers. They employ, hundreds of thousands of people. And obviously, we have always, for a long period of time, tried to make our products better, which actually leads to less customer service errands as well, because if the product works better and more easy to understand, you will have less errands. But this is the first time we've launched a technology that makes the experience so much better that it actually reduced the amount of errands and the amount of interactions with humans to the equivalent of about 700 full-time agents, right? And we wanted to share that metric. We understood that metric was going to be slightly, looked upon and people would react to it. Yeah. But we also felt that it's important that politicians and society recognizes that this is not just something that's going to happen in the future. It's starting to happen right now. And I think from a society perspective, I think it's time to start considering what are we going to do.
And there's a workforce implication there, clearly. Yeah. Do you plan to deepen your relationship with OpenAI, with Sam Altman?
Well, I'm very grateful for the fact that we've had a very deep relationship for a long period of time. We've worked with them. When I first experienced ChatGPT, which for me was like, as I think for most people, mind blowing the first time you use it. Even more, I remember than the first time I used Google, 20 years ago. But when we did that, I reached out to Sam. We have a common investor, and I said, look, I'd love to get 30 minutes with you. And I said, I would love for Klarna to be, one of the companies that you try us, let us try anything on any of your new services, and we will try to, see how we can use them to create value for our customers. And since then, we've had a very close relationship, and we're happy to hear that we're among the largest customers today.
And it's helpful, many would say, to kind of lean into the AI theme if you're looking to that IPO. So what is the latest on that in terms of the timeline, Sebastian, and the location? Have you set your sights on New York? Is it going to happen this year?
Well, I think to answer that, it is helpful to lean into it for another reason as well, which is that, like, you know, when Bitcoin came along, I looked at the technology, I wasn't convinced. I always go to my mom and I say, look, you know, will you use this? Will this help you somehow, right? And she was like, what is this? Like, she couldn't really see the value of it. Now, when it looks at AI and we looked at this, we said, look, this actually creates real value. We can see how the technology does that. And it also made me believe that as a business, not only for the IPO, but as a business, we have to lean in. We have to encourage our employees and everyone to lean into this. And I sincerely believe that if you look already 12 months from now, you're going to see what we may refer to as AI tigers or something like that, or maybe just AI companies. But what we're going to see is companies that have really ingrained AI at the core of their business. They will move much faster. They will have higher revenue per employee. They will be more agile, more fast-moving. And so I think from an IPO perspective, obviously, you know, yes, that's important. And we are now, you know, we have met the criteria that we have set up for ourselves to IPO.
It happens this year?
Well, I hope that we will be able to make it happen quite soon.
And New York?
Well, that is not decided yet.
Okay.
But I think, you know, obviously it is, US is now our largest market by revenue. It's our, you know, we have 5 consecutive quarters of gross profitability, profitable. So, and that was kind of the criteria we set up for the IPO actually was, you know, people have been asking us the IPO question many years. And I've always been very consistent in my answers, which is that I always look to the Google IPO. And I feel that that was a perfect IPO. You had a company who had proven itself. It had proven its business model. It was a global company. But it was also a company who had the majority of its growth ahead of itself, right? And I think that that's been the timing we've been looking for. So now we're profitable in the US. We have, you know, very meaningful presence in the US. We have 30 million customers there. But at the same point of time, we are still 0.5% of the total payments market. You know, there's Visa, there's MasterCard, there's Amex. It's tremendous big companies and tremendous opportunities.
There's been some boardroom drama at Klarna, clearly. Your biggest backer, Sequoia, they put Matthew Miller on the board in January. He started to try to push out Michael Moritz, who's been a keen backer of you for a long time. Now Matthew Miller's off the board. They got someone else in from Sequoia. Have you resolved that? Does that risk derailing the plans for the IPO, Sebastian?
Well, look, I think that's a question, obviously, to Sequoia and the shareholders primarily. But from my perspective, what I'm really happy about is Sir Michael Moritz, you know, joined the board already in 2009. Right? So it's been 15 years we worked to it. And he has helped and shepherded this company from, you know, the small regional $30 million revenue company that we were back then into, you know, over $2 billion in revenue that we're right now, right? And you have to also remember what sometimes is forgotten is that Klarna was a profitable company up until 17 and 18.
But was this a battle about control, ultimately? Is that tension still there?
No, I think, again, as I said, that we're very happy that Michael is on the board and is going to continuously support us because of his... And I think, you know, what I really appreciate about Michael is that he's always looked to the interest of all the shareholders collectively.